Welcome to the Theology Made podcast. I'm Dr. Jordan Vale. In today's episode, we're going to look at the saint who couldn't stop sinning. There's a pear tree in North Africa, sometime around the year 370. And under it, a group of teenage boys are about to do something none of them will ever be able to explain. The pears are not good. They belong to a neighbor, and the boys honestly have better fruit at home. Nobody's hungry. But late one night, they strip the tree anyway, more pears than they could eat in a week, and they carry them off and throw most of them to the pigs. One of those boys will spend the next 40 years turning that night over in his mind. What kept him going back to it was just the senselessness of it. No one got hurt. The pears were almost worthless. He had stolen something he didn't even want for no reward, at real risk, for the pure pleasure of doing the thing he knew he should not do. Why would anyone do that? And he couldn't let the question go. We understand a man who steals bread when he's starving. But he had not been starving. He had wanted nothing the theft could give him except the theft itself. The wrong was the whole point, and he could not see the bottom of it. To understand why stolen pears would haunt a man for the rest of his life, you have to know what he became and what he spent that whole life running from. He was born in 354 in a small town in Roman North Africa in what is now Algeria. His mother prayed for him without stopping. His father honestly just wanted him to be impressive, and he was. Words came to his mouth the way Mozart comes to a child prodigy's hands. By 17, he had been sent to the city of Carthage to study rhetoric, the art of persuasion, which in the Roman world was the fastest road to money and power. And Carthage gave him a whole new world, and he loved every second of it. He described arriving there as walking straight into a place where unholy loves boiled up around him on every side. He took a lover, they stayed together for years, and she gave him a son, a boy he named Odysseus, which means given by God. That's a strange name to give a child you fathered outside any marriage your world would recognize, but even then, part of him was reaching for God with hands that were busy doing something else. He spent the next decade and more living as two men at once. One of the men was climbing. He chased the best teaching positions and posts across the empire and eventually won an imperial appointment in Milan, a position that put the life his father had dreamed of within arm's reach. He was brilliant, admired, on his way up, with a partner, a son, and a future. The other man in him was looking for something and couldn't find it. For 9 years, he gave himself to a religion called Manichaeism, which explained the existence of evil by cutting the universe in half, light on one side and darkness on the other. Part of its appeal was the silent permission it gave him to live a dualistic life. If the darkness was its own separate force, then the bad things he was doing, they weren't fully his. And when the movement's famous teachers finally sat in front of him, and they couldn't answer his hardest questions, he walked away from it, now more restless than before. In Milan, he started slipping into the back of a well-known bishop's church. He went at first to study the man as a performer, to see how a master handled a crowd, and he found himself caught up by what the man was actually saying against his own will. The scriptures that he had dismissed as crude were being read in a way he had never imagined, and the door he thought was closed, it turned out to have a handle. His mother had followed him to Milan by then. Her name was Monica, and she had been praying towards this exact moment for most of his life. But she did do the practical thing a mother of her time would do. She arranged a respectable marriage, the kind that would finish his climb. But there was one obstacle. The girl was still too young to marry, and the match required sending away the woman he had lived with for over a decade. He sent her away. He wrote later that his heart, where it had clung to her, was torn open and left bleeding. And then, with the wedding still 2 years off and his bed suddenly empty, he took another lover anyway, because he could not stand to be alone with himself. And this is the part everyone leaves out when they turn him into a marble statue or place City of God prominently on their bookshelf. He knew precisely what he wanted to become. He could see the better life with total clarity. He could describe it more beautifully than almost any person alive, argue for it, move audiences to tears about it, and he could not make himself walk through it. He would resolve to change and then stand there watching himself not change, as though his own will were a stranger who would not take his orders. And there's a prayer from those years that gives away the entire game he was playing. He asked God to make him pure, and then under his breath, he attached a condition: not yet. He was asking to be rescued from the one thing he was not finished enjoying. He wanted the cure on the guarantee that it would not work out too soon. And anyone who has ever set an alarm to begin a whole new life on Monday morning, we know that prayer. Well, it finally came apart in a garden in Milan in the summer of 386. He was past 30. A visitor had been in his house that day, telling stories about ordinary people who had walked away from everything for God. Men that were not smarter nor stronger than he was. And these stories, they didn't inspire him, they humiliated him. Here were average people doing the thing he could not do, and he was supposed to be the gifted one in every room. He fled the house into the garden with something like a panic attack. He threw himself down under the bare covering of a fig tree and wept. And the thing he kept saying over and over was a question about time. How long? How long would he keep saying tomorrow, then tomorrow, then tomorrow? Why not put an end to it this very hour? And then, through the garden wall, from the house next door, he heard a child's voice. A boy or girl, he could never afterwards say which, singing one short phrase again and again, the way children do when they've turned a handful of words into a song in their head. Take up and read. Take up and read. He had a book of Paul's letters lying nearby. He opened it wherever it fell and read the first words his eyes touched, a line that told him to put down the appetites he kept losing to, and to clothe himself instead in Christ. He said that as he finished the sentence, light poured in, and every last shadow of doubt was simply gone. The man's name was Augustine. And the reason he still matters 16 centuries later is what he did with the discovery, that he had not been able to save himself. Most people who turn their lives around tell a story about willpower afterward. I was lost, and then I pulled myself together. I found my way. Augustine told the opposite story, and he would build a theology out of it that was going to shape the next 1,500 years of the Western world. A while later, a calm, respectable British monk named Pelagius began teaching something that at first sounded completely sensible. God commands us to be good, so we must be capable of being good. The power to obey is already inside us, and we only have to use it. Stop making excuses, choose the right thing. Augustine had spent half his life trying to choose the right thing by raw effort and losing. And he knew in his bones Pelagius had it wrong. He argued that the human will is not nearly as free as we like to flatter ourselves. That a person can be dragged along by his own habits, like a man bound in a chain he forged himself one link at a time. And no quantity of clever reasoning or sincere intention can close the distance between the good we can see and the good we actually do. Something has to reach in from outside and lift a will that cannot lift itself. He called that grace. The man who could not stop sinning spent the rest of his life insisting no one can, at least not on their own power. And there was nothing gloomy in it for him. He was simply reporting what he'd experienced after running the experiment on his own life for 30 years. He was baptized at Easter in 387 with his son standing beside him. Within a year, his mother was dead, having lived just long enough to see the thing she had prayed for. Not long after that, his son died too, still a teenager. He returned to North Africa, became the bishop of a port town called Hippo, and stayed there until the end. He wrote an account of his own wreckage and addressed it straight to God, and it became the first true autobiography in the Western world. Sure, other men had written records of their public triumphs, but he wrote a record of his private collapse, out loud, on purpose, and he called it worship. He died in 430 with a barbarian army at the city walls and the Roman world he had known coming down around him. We tend to assume the goal of a moral life is to finally get it together, to want the right things and then do them, cleanly, the way a competent adult handles their affairs. Augustine's entire life is an argument that this is not how human beings actually work, that the gap between knowing the good and doing it is not some private defect you happen to suffer from. It's the everyday, ordinary human condition. He opened his Confessions with a single sentence that he spent the rest of the book proving. "You have made us for yourself," he wrote, "and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." He spent 30 years trying harder, and the restlessness never lifted. What he came to believe was stronger and stranger than willpower. The restlessness was pointing at something, and the long, humiliating inability to fix himself turned out to be the most honest thing about him, and the first thing worth listening to. The pears, turns out, were never really about the pears.
Take up and read, take up and read.
Thanks for listening to the Theology Made podcast. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on.